I worked just shy of 40 years, but my pension still wasn't going to be enough for us. So when he called out of the blue, offering a free pension review, I was all ears. He spoke professionally about investments. He seemed a really decent guy. Just shy of 40 years pension. He took all of it.
Seriously popular.
Welcome to Alas, Vine and Hitchens. I am Sarah Vine.
And I am Peter Hitchens.
This week is Labour's new definition of Islamophobia a threat to free speech? And Peter would like to ask whether the death penalty might be better than unofficial execution by another criminal. We'll be back after this.
Heathcliff, Heathcliff, Heathcliff.
Audible presents Heathcliff, a new original drama inspired by
Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights.
I do not know what life is without Cathy.
Before his descent into monstrous revenge, there were 3 missing years. A time of possibility, freedom and a different kind of love.
Escape this story. She has trapped you in.
Starring Darryl McCormack as Heathcliff. Listen now, only on Audible. See audible.co.uk for terms.
Welcome back to Alas, Vine and Hitchens. I'm Sarah Vine.
She is.
Hooray. And the question is, my question this week is Labour's new definition of Islamophobia, or which we don't quite know what it's going to be yet, but it's sort of
they've dropped Islamophobia, haven't
yes,
they?
They have.
New definition
it's anti-Muslim
it is,
hate, I think. If I'm correct, I could be wrong. I'm sure the listeners will correct me.
But they've moved away from Islamophobia,
they moved.
Interestingly.
Apparently it includes the notion that portraying Islam in a manner that some of its adherents might find disrespectful or scandalous is a problem. And I think what they're trying to do essentially is argue that being a Muslim is like a race thing, not
it's a protected characteristic.
It's a protected characteristic
by implication.
And I was thinking, because one of my favourite films ever is Life of Brian, of course, although I think it's not as good as Monty Python and the Holy Grail. That itself is controversial. And I always loved that film because it was just so sort of irreverent about religion in general. And I think it's important that you can be irreverent, rather, about people's beliefs. I absolutely have no problem what people want to believe, and you know, I have my own beliefs, but I don't expect them to be treated as protected characteristics. You know, it's just a belief. It's not a kind of, it doesn't single me out, doesn't make me special. And I find this, I think this whole idea that, you know, you could get to a stage in this country where it'd be fine to take the mickey out of a Christian or a Buddhist, but not fine to take mickey out of a Muslim. For me, that is really weird and also quite patronising, because I'm sure plenty of Muslims have got perfectly good senses of humour and wouldn't get upset and offended. There's a small minority of very hardline people who would get upset and offended, in the same way that there's a small minority of very hardline Christians who did in fact get upset and offended by the Life of Brian. I think it was banned in Norway for a very long time, and also Ireland. So I just thought it was an interesting conversation to have about, you know, one can respect somebody's beliefs, but not necessarily have to tread on eggshells the whole time.
Yeah, I don't, as somebody who believes in the Christian faith, I don't enjoy it when people mock my faith, particularly when they do so, as they often do, ignorantly and crudely. But I know I have to put up with it, because here's a very simple proposition. I may believe in God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, but they don't. And there's nothing that I can do to compel them to believe it. And if what I think isn't true, which it might be, because they say it's belief, not knowledge, then all I have is a set of political, moral and philosophical opinions which can be judged by anybody as they like. No one has any particular reason to follow them. Same goes for Islam. It is a set of political, moral, social opinions about the world, which if you don't believe in, you can disagree with. Disagreement's fine. I don't, for instance, there's a paradox in this for me. I think that you should be allowed to, because any law which bans mockery or criticism of religion would be wrong, should be allowed to do it, doesn't necessarily mean that having that freedom means that you should.
No, quite.
There are two different things here, and I would generally not mock the faith of somebody else, because I think it would be an unpleasant thing to do.
Yes, we don't have a blasphemy law in this country, do we?
Not anymore, I think, no.
I think,
but there was a vestigial one, which I think Mary Whitehouse exploited a bit, but I think it's all gone now. But it seems to be creeping back in this exercise to try and make it harder to criticise Islam.
Lots of religions have eccentric things about them,
By their nature,
funny
they're
hats
making
that
some
people-
pretty astounding claims.
Yes, but also, there's some funny hats that people wear and things that they
There's
do.
that.
with sort of
I
incense and all
haven't
that.
met atheists who wear funny hats.
Well, exactly.
as well.
It's a rich theme for people to mine if they want to have a bit of fun with it. But I don't understand why Islam is being singled out for this treatment.
Oh, yes, you do.
Well,
Because the Labour Party is very worried about what has up
what
until
about
now
its
been
voter base?
an untroubled Muslim vote, which it's gained over the years, and now particularly because of Gaza, it's very worried about losing them, I think.
I always think of that faction as quite a narrow, extreme faction of people. I don't think you should make laws for minorities just because they cause trouble. The government is for everybody, and the vast majority of people in this country, and also Muslims in this country. I had dinner with my friend the other day who's a Muslim, and he was taking the piss out of himself because it was Ramadan and he wasn't supposed to be drinking, but he was very tempted, and there was he jokes about it. He tries his best, but like everybody, occasionally lapses. And I think most people of that faith are not sort of very hard line. I think there are lots of Muslims who are perfectly sort of jolly and normal and like the rest of us, and they have a religion, they have a belief, they try and adhere to it the best they can, but it's not the sort of.
I think they take their religion more seriously than many Western Christians do. I think they're much more comparable to the way Christians were in this country and in Europe 4 or 5 centuries ago.
Yes, I think that's correct.
Intensity of opinion. There is something quite potent and intense about the Islamic Declaration and the whole thing, which to some extent I admire, because I think there's a lot of milk and water religion in the West, which needs a bit more backbone. So I've got no complaint about that. So maybe Muslims are more sensitive to criticism, but I wasn't saying that Labour were doing it because of the Muslim vote to recommend it. I was saying this is an explanation, and I think the explanation as to why it's happening. I think it's wrong for them to do so. I think generally, doing things for purely electoral reasons is bad anyway. It's not a good way of governing a country or of using
also, you
democratic
just tie
systems.
yourself in
I'm against it. As I say, I do think that first of all, people who have difficulties with Islam and its precepts, as I do, should argue them firmly and politely with Muslims when the occasion arises, particularly about Islam's attitude towards women. And I have argued with Muslims, and I find that they tend to rather enjoy it. In my experience, but that doesn't mean that I'm glad to see people taking a very strongly hostile and mocking view of a faith which quite a lot of perfectly nice people take seriously.
But I also think that if this law becomes enshrined, and the thing is, making laws, there's too much legality anyway in the world, and making more laws doesn't really make things any better. But you like to have conversations with your friends. If this happens, you wouldn't feel you could.
No, it's terrible.
Do you know what I mean? It would be like, I can't say anything in case you sort of report me to the thought police.
But this is a key feature of this government. This government has absolutely no friendship for freedom.
No.
Identity cards, the abolition of jury trial now being pursued, and this is the kind of people which they are. They are revolutionaries who don't believe in freedom of speech for people they disagree with, and ultimately, left to their own devices, they will squash it. And people should be aware of this. And if you're making a choice at a general election, which we will all eventually have to do, then whatever else you may think of the parties which are not the Labour Party, you might bear in mind that the Labour Party is a menace to freedom of speech and thought, which I think it is, and has been really since the Blair years, when they declared themselves to be the political arm of the British people as a whole. It's just an outrageous statement.
I mean, I suppose in some ways that's one kind of advantage that Conservatives have, which is they've always been quite good on this.
Not to a point. I mean, let's get carried away.
I'm not expecting an endorsement, Peter, obviously, but I'm just like, but I mean, this idea that you don't have the right not to be offended is quite, and it doesn't. I mean, it's not just about religion. It also goes into sort of debates about trans rights and all this kind of stuff. This idea that you should try and legislate against people's feelings, emotions, reactions. It's sort of impossible to do because people will feel what they feel, they'll think what they think. And you can pass a law that says, Peter, you're not allowed to think that, but you're still going to think it.
Well, though in fact, if you have laws that say you can't say something, then very soon a lot of people cease to think it because you can't express a thought. No. It becomes increasingly unthinkable. That's one of the principles of 1984, that what they try to make, if it can't be expressed in newspeak, eventually people have no way of thinking it. So that's the way around it is. But I would say to people who have strong objections to Islam and its precepts, get to know some Muslims, argue about it with them, and give them a good reason to think maybe that they might be mistaken. But to increase hostility between the faiths is daft, and generally will end in nothing but tears. But this planned legislation to make it impossible to criticize Islam in some ways is just plain wrong and will prevent discussion of exactly the kind we should have.
Exactly. And I think what's happened with Islam is that it's as though the sort of mad far-right Christians in America had suddenly become, very loud and prominent. And I think that's what we're hearing so much of around Islam is the very extreme factions, particularly obviously at the moment with Iran and stuff like that. But people just do forget that there are an awful lot of people who belong to this religion who are, completely not extremists and who just have a faith, and that's what they believe in, and as you say, they follow their faith in the way that they do.
Well, this new breed of hard right warmongering Christians might sometimes wonder who it is exactly that they resemble.
What form they may take.
Well, no,
do you think they might be orange?
Are they perhaps rather more like the Ayatollah Khamenei than they are like the Archbishop of Canterbury?
Yes, I think it's the same. It's the same thing, just wearing a different hat, isn't it? Probably a sillier hat.
Well, it's the same similarities. Yeah.
Anyway, let us know what you think. I think it's quite a big, important issue, and I think that we should not shut up about it because I don't think this is a good idea. After the break, in light of the recent killing of Ian Huntley, Peter, quite rightly, is asking whether the death penalty might be better than an unofficial execution at the hands of another criminal. We'll be back after this.
Heathcliff, Heathcliff, Heathcliff.
Audible presents Heathcliff, a new original drama inspired by
Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights.
I do not know what life is without Cathy.
Before his descent into monstrous revenge, there were 3 missing years, a time of possibility, freedom and a different kind of love.
Escape this story she has trapped you in.
Starring Darryl McCormack as Heathcliff. Listen now, only on Audible. See audible.co.uk for terms.
You're still listening, at least we hope you are, to Alas, Vine Hitchens. She is Sarah Vine, and I am Peter Hitchens.
Yes,
I've got that right way round, haven't I?
I suppose.
And what I wanted to talk about this week is the curious case of Ian Huntley. Now, we can't discuss a lot of it because there is going to have to be a trial of a person alleged to have killed Mr. Huntley, so forgive us if we don't talk about the actual event that much. My question is this. Is there something about the death penalty which we're not looking at very seriously? For many, many years, liberal-minded people have viewed support for the death penalty as an attitude so vile that they will basically not speak to anybody who actually espouses it. And I know this personally because long, long years ago, I was driven by facts and logic into concluding that it was really a necessary part of a proper criminal justice system. And then I was driven by the incessant attack on the presumption of innocence and on juries in our criminal justice system to say, well, we couldn't possibly have it now. But when we see what's just happened in the Ian Huntley case, it draws to our attention the very important thing that the view of heinous murder, and I do think there are different kinds of murder, the view of heinous murder by the people of this country is so strongly condemnatory that the punishment of it by nothing more than a period of imprisonment simply isn't sufficient to make people feel that justice is being done. There's another element of this which I've always felt, particularly left-wing people have ignored. Should you not distinguish in a justice system between the value of human life and the value of property? And yet at the moment, really, all we can do with people who kill in particularly disgusting ways, as Ian Huntley did, for instance, is to send them to prison for very long periods or until they die, which is ultimately not different in quality from the very long sentences which we give to people who steal things or who engage in violence short of murder. And to me, once you don't have a death penalty for the most heinous murders, you devalue the whole coinage of punishment, which I think is what's happened. Which is also why I think the Liberals got rid of the death penalty in the 1960s. They themselves were not prepared, in members of the governing class, members of Parliament, were not prepared to take responsibility for the safeguarding of the people by wielding the civil sword. They weren't prepared actually to justly and lawfully kill somebody who'd committed a heinous murder. And therefore, from then on, and it is true that from the middle 60s, the whole of our criminal justice system has grown steadily weaker and weaker and weaker because it has no core and it has no real sense of its own justice.
No, yes, I mean, I think there's a case for saying that there is a certain amount of moral cowardice around this, this issue. And I think people feel one of the things that people have always said to me whenever I've had this debate, which actually I've had quite a lot, is, are you going to do it? Who's going to kill them? It'd be
an odd choice asking you to do it.
No, but you're allowed. The problem is that you have to have somebody who is prepared to to do the execution, and that in itself is that you're asking somebody to murder somebody effectively, and that's difficult.
No, you're not.
Well, you are really.
You're not. It's not murder to execute justice.
No, but you're asking someone to kill another human being on your behalf.
Yes, but not unlawfully and out of
not unlawfully, but it's still morally difficult.
Desire for gain, or whatever is the motive for murder. It's usually some sort of desire for gain.
Well, no,
whether it's monetary gain or gain of freedom in your own life. That's why people murder, and it's not. You can't equate lawful execution with murder. Those murders, I tend to think, the murders which are committed as acts of rage can't really be dealt with by the death penalty, and I would generally not.
No, because they're not really premeditated. They happen. But if you have situations of women who have been in abusive relationships who finally snap and then kill their husband, so it's just
our justice system recognises
you're
that.
dealing with very complicated human emotions. But I think what you're saying is actually quite valid, because someone like Ian Huntley, he's been attacked before in prison. I mean, he had his throat slit, he had boiling water thrown over him. My question is, what does it tell us about the prison system that a man, allegedly, is able to pick up a metal bar, as I think it was, and I think the phrase was slit him open like a pig. How is that possible? How can that happen? I mean, it's not a functioning system.
Well, I can tell you a bit about that, which is that we basically govern our prisons by bluff and by ceding an awful lot of the authority in prisons to the prisoners themselves, who are in control of far too much of prison life as it is, and therefore this kind of thing is much more likely than it would otherwise be, and even segregating prisons can't wholly protect them from it, as you see. And that is another of the effects of liberalising our criminal justice system. The functioning motto or guiding principle of prisons until the middle 60s was what was called the due punishment of responsible persons. What you said was that a person was responsible for his or her actions, went to prison as a due punishment of somebody who knew what they were doing and still did it. And it was also punishment. Now the prisons are technically not supposed to be punitive in themselves. The deprivation of liberty is the punishment. The prison itself isn't. In fact, it's almost the other way round. For many people who arrive in prison, it is the life they have to lead in prison at the mercy of violent and predatory criminals, which is the punishment, which is almost totally out of the control of the state which sent them there, and which the state can't protect them from. Now, again, I think this all stems from the decision to abandon the concept of good and evil, and of punishment for wicked actions, which we used to have. And prisons have become a sort of another attempt at social work.
Yes, they
so,
are
like the police,
yes.
it has not worked.
Yeah.
The reason why there's such opposition to the death penalty is it would mean restoring that kind of view of the world, where if you did bad things, you got punished for them.
Yes. I mean, the thing is, though, as you said earlier, it wouldn't it wouldn't be possible because you can't rely sufficiently on the justice system to make the right decisions.
Then put it right.
So
then put the justice system right. I've got some very simple measures to do so.
But somebody like Lucy Letby, for example, would be undoubtedly condemned to death.
No, I don't agree.
You don't think she would?
No, because I think the reason why cases like the Letby trial are possible is because of, to a great extent, because of the other thing which Roy Jenkins did. And people are talking quite rightly about attacks on the jury system now. But in, I think, 1967, Roy Jenkins removed the unanimous verdict, which is a terrific breach of what had previously been a very strong barrier. What also happened was that he removed any qualification whatsoever for being on a jury. So anybody can be on a jury once they hit the age of 18. Anybody, no experience of life, no education, no responsibility, never seen anything, can be on a jury and decide the fate of another human being. Ridiculous.
No, that is correct.
The old system was a property qualification, which I don't defend, but I absolutely insist that it was not beyond the wit of man to devise another system of qualification to keep people off juries who didn't know anything about the world. I don't think that a unanimous jury composed of the sort of people who used to sit on juries before the Jenkins reforms would ever have convicted Lucy Letby, because they would have seen quite clearly that the prosecution was, and interestingly enough, the defence speech is now available to anybody on the web, seen quite clearly that the prosecution was based on a presumption of guilt. Which it absolutely was.
But my point is really that you couldn't possibly have the death penalty, because until you reform the justice system so that it actually works properly, and the direction of travel on that is not great.
No, sure. I mean,
Lammy is talking about getting rid of jury trials for I can't remember what the classification of crime is, but basically we're going in the wrong direction. We're going completely the wrong direction.
All we can do here is we can discuss what could be done, and by doing so, if there is any thought in the world of politics and journalism, getting other people to realise how far this country and society has strayed from being intelligently and rationally run. But it's actually rational sometimes to execute guilty, heinous murderers. And you need to devise a system where you can do this without endangering justice. What I very much fear, and I think the public reaction to the Huntley death is a sign of this, is that within 10 or 15 years, a populist government in this country will reintroduce the death penalty, possibly by referendum anyway, under circumstances in which it would be intolerable. And if you don't want that to happen, then my constant plea to liberal-minded persons in this country is, listen to me. You may think I'm horrible, but if you ignore me, you will get people who are far, far, far worse quite quickly.
You've just got. I mean, that's just sort of mob justice, isn't it? Really,
it could happen.
It could happen. Well,
it's not all that long since they had public executions.
I mean,
in the streets
there is
of London.
a broader point about this: the fact that this government is systematically dismantling so many of our kind of.
It's a horrible government, but who's criticising it in an effective and coherent way? Nobody.
Shall we do some letters?
Let's.
This is a question for you, so you should probably read it.
Yeah,
the first one. Hello, my question is to Peter.
All right. This is from Brian, with a Y. I'm courting an Irish woman, and to my surprise, when I went to her family's house, I found a big map of Europe where England is absent. Wales, Scotland, and Ireland are all intact, with Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland as one. Have we been living under an illusion of one Great Britain? Also, they still had grievances of the Irish Potato Famine, for which they still personally blame England. Well, they're right to do that. It was very badly managed by the London government, and I think there's no point in pretending otherwise. And we should all be very full of regrets about it. But the map used to be published, I know, by the European Parliament. I used to have a copy on my office wall until it was swept away by history or something. But it clearly showed. First of all, the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland was reduced to a tiny little dotted line. The principal borders in Ireland were those between the ancient provinces of Ulster, Munster, Leinster and Connaught. And England was all divided up into regions and didn't exist. And then there was Scotland and Wales. And this is clear. This is how the European Union imagines things. The European Union hates federated countries on its own territory. and it likes to break them up into regions and smaller components. And Germany
Why?
Because the European Union ultimately is a great big soup in which all the countries which join it are boiled until they go soft and can eventually be turned into a pottage, in which they lose all their characteristics. So it creates new divisions within those countries.
Or it just stirs up old ones.
I remember when Poland had yet to join the European Union, I remember arriving in Germany by road from Poland, and the first sign you saw was, as you crossed the border from Poland to Germany, was "Welcome to the European Union" in huge letters. And then a few hundred yards further than that, there was a slightly smaller sign saying "Welcome to the state of Brandenburg." And then if you look really carefully, almost buried in the long grass, a tiny little sign saying "Welcome to Germany." And it summed it up beautifully. And Germany itself is all regionalised. And in fact, it basically functions as a miniature European
So
Union.
is France.
France, well, they've
Well, a bit less these
regionalised
days,
France in a big way as well, yeah. I
So
believe
France-
they created
And actually Italy is the same.
regions in Portugal which didn't even exist.
Yeah. It's funny because having spent a lot of time in Europe and having grown up there, I mean, it is a very regional place. I mean, there are people in Turin who can't understand what anyone in Sicily is saying.
Quite
I mean,
so.
there's completely different
Well,
languages and
Italy
dialects.
is a particular problem in that way. But yeah, it's true. But they took full advantage of that, and that's how it works. But it's I
Britain
remember
obviously-
there were some protests about this map. I remember, and the European Parliament eventually reissued one in which the word England was inserted.
Oh, great! That's very nice.
I had both, but they were embarrassed because they had inadvertently let loose the truth about what they thought. And there was an attempt to create regions in England, and it was the first one. John Prescott held a referendum in the northeast of England, which Neil Heron and others campaigned against. And the way they won it against John Prescott was they told the Tory party in the northeast of England, "Don't get involved in this. Stay away. We don't want you anywhere near us. If you come near this referendum, we'll lose it." And by that brilliant technique, they won and threw John Prescott's region into the sea. And so Britain was never regionalised.
Yeah.
Interesting
Yeah,
piece
no,
of
that's
English history, not widely known. But
Well, I mean, I think that what was always fascinating about Britain, England, whatever you want to call it, Britain, the United Kingdom, to me when I came back, was that you had national newspapers.
Yes.
Because Italy didn't ever have national. You just read your local newspaper.
No, nor France, really.
It was the idea that you would have a sort of a national tabloid that everybody read, which was quite extraordinary, and that you'd have a national television station and radio station that would broadcast to everybody in the country. It was just really different from what I had experienced.
It's absolutely true.
And I always quite liked it.
Well, yeah.
But anyway.
But it doesn't mean you necessarily need to impose it on England. But that's why that map exists. So I've seen that map, and I know where it came from.
Yes.
It's one of the reasons why the Irish are quite keen on the European Union. That I would like to say to all Irish nationalists who may be listening, it does seem slightly paradoxical to me that having campaigned so hard to be independent from Britain, you have now signed up to membership of the European Union, so you have no independence at all. But no, there it is. Call me old-fashioned.
I don't think you can really apply logic to these very emotional situations.
I don't know. I don't think you can apply to everything.
You can try. Hello, I am Ty. My question is to both of you. Konstantin Kissin has said several times that British MPs should be paid more to halt their incompetence and gullibility to corruption and to encourage them to do more and deliver results. How true do you think this is, or would human greed just thrive and they will still want more and continue to be corrupt? And wouldn't it be an insult to the British public who struggle to put food on the table to be warm in winter to increase money on already well-paid and often useless MPs? Well, I would say that if you want better MPs, you need to pay them properly.
I would say there's no evidence in the worlds of business, journalism, or any other of which I have experience that paying people more makes them any better at what they do. Often rather the contrary. So I don't think this is some kind of letter from somebody working for the MPs lobby. Don't do it. What you want to do if you want better MPs is to, first of all, you have to have a better education system.
Well, yes,
and so that there are more educated people around who know something. And secondly, you need to destroy the iron rule of the party machine machines over the selection of MPs,
Yeah, you can't do that.
which currently selects people on the basis of loyalty to the party, rather than, and which of course is an almost certain way of getting people who can't think and won't think and are not interested in independent
Everything's done
thought.
by
So
commission.
money will not solve it.
No, but it will. What it will do is it will make it more likely that people who are very talented and highly educated and could potentially make a lot of money elsewhere might be more tempted to go into politics.
Politics has become a career,
No, but
it's quite a well-paid career. I mean, they come out of PPE at Oxford and whatever its Cambridge equivalent is. They become special advisors to ministers within an amazingly short time. They're then selected as members of Parliament, and the next thing you know, they're ministers of the Crown. Politics is now actually a career like the law,
the civil service.
and it's
I also-
not badly rewarded. I'd never see any of these people starving, and indeed, I think they keep many of the restaurants of central London going.
Well, I think the thing is, so I'd like to say a few things, which is that one, I sort of reject this notion that all politicians are corrupt and useless. They're actually quite a lot of them are not corrupt and useless.
I'm not saying they're corrupt.
No,
I'm
but
just saying they're dim.
But
Some of them may be corrupt. But
yes, of course. But like in any sort of, broadly speaking, most people who go into politics do go into politics for the right reason. I don't think they go in thinking, rubbing their hands together, thinking this is going to make me lots of lovely lolly, because I can assure you it doesn't. Being a politician is actually quite an expensive thing to do, because particularly now, where you can't make any mistakes at all, and everything has to be completely transparent. So you have to be very strict about paying for things and all of that kind of stuff, which is as it should be. But the whole argument about politicians' pay goes back to Margaret Thatcher, who didn't want to give them a pay rise, and so she gave them expense accounts. And, that is an absurdity. If you're being asked to run two houses, which most politicians are, because you have to have a house in the constituency and then you have to have a house in London or a flat in London at least, or vice versa, it depends which way around you want to do it, that is quite a large cost. You've got a lot of travel expenses, which you have to pay for yourself because they're political.
My heart is breaking.
What? No, I know.
My heart is breaking
but
as
I'm
you say
making
this.
case because someone needs to make it. And it's,
salt tears are rolling down my withered cheeks.
And if you want politicians who don't have affairs and run off with parliamentary secretaries because they never see their wives, or you want politicians who function, who aren't alcoholics, you have to make it possible for them to do their jobs. And the jobs are very intense, 24/7. I can't speak for sort of in olden days, but right now, if you're a politician, you are probably working more hours than most people. And you are probably, if you add up the hours that you do and the amount of money you get paid, you're probably working for less than minimum wage, because it is 24 hours a day.
Well, let's have a job.
7 days a week.
Let's have a work reduction scheme, because I would say that probably 95% of the laws which are passed at Westminster now make the country worse than they were before.
Well, that's a different
So let's
subject.
not have so many laws being made. They obviously aren't any good at it. And I believe that one of the first steps we should take is the setting up of a joint committee of senior members of the Commons and Lords called the Unintended Consequences Committee, which would examine for at least a year the contents of any parliamentary bill to see what its unintended consequences will be, because those will be the ones we
that's
suffer.
a very good idea.
And simply to issue a statement at the end saying this bill should go no further in most cases. We should have greatly reduced sessions. We should go back to the system where if you really wanted to carry on fighting for a bill, you have to sit late into the early hours. Mm-hmm. So if you want to suffer for it, don't ask for my sympathy. And less legislation. And the other thing we need to do is to rebuild local government so that councillors instead of MPs have to do all this social work stuff of fixing people's drains and dropped curbs and all the rest, which MPs currently spend ages of their time working on, which completely wastes their time. And you look, every time you see Parliament on television, except when it's Prime Minister's questions, the chamber is practically empty. What are those people doing? They're writing letters about constituents' problems, which their local councillor should be handling. That needs to be fixed.
That's it. The tension between parliamentary politics and local politics has always been at the heart of how difficult it is to be a proper MP and to be a good MP, because if you try and do both properly, you honestly have no time to do anything else. I mean, you don't have time sound asleep, basically.
I have very mixed feelings about Enoch Powell, but in some ways he was very clever. One of the things he says, members of Parliament should not have offices. When they started having offices and secretaries and staff and all the rest, that was when they started becoming useless, because they were constantly preoccupied with the nuts and bolts of being basically a glorified local councillor, and were not holding the government to account or being in Parliament. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would not. I think that might have worked then, but I don't think it would work now because of the internet and because of the amount of information, literally the vast sums of information that is coming at you as an MP, and you have to you cannot ignore any of it. You have to go through. But one of the things I find,
it would certainly be better to go back to that than to start paying MPs £250,000 a year.
I'm not suggesting you pay them £250,000 a year.
What figure would you suggest?
I think probably something in the region of 120,000 would be reasonable.
Well, they're quite close to that already, aren't they?
So I think that would be that's a reasonable sum of money.
They're still.
For example,
how shall I say?
That's
unappealing.
But that's what a sort of. Of course, they're unappealing. But that's what a sort of. There are civil servants who get paid a lot more than that. There are people in government jobs who are paid a lot more than that. There are some university chancellors who are paid £400,000 a year. So I think in terms of if you consider that it's a high tier job, it's highly stressful. There's a lot of personal jeopardy to it because it is very, very, it destroys people's lives. But it is a calling, and I think that
I would say, Sarah, in that way, you're saying this, but in terms of stress, it's absolutely minimal compared with that undergone by, for instance, officers in the armed forces who are punishingly judged for any failure, whose lives are.
Yes, I don't think they're paid enough either.
24. But if you wanted to worry about a job which was underpaid by the taxpayer, then I think that's a much more urgent one to worry about. And there's always someone we're treating the not just the officers but the NCOs and the other ranks of the armed forces very badly, and as a result we're not retaining them, and that's another reason.
We treat our veterans terribly. But the question really was about
put that so much earlier on my list of things to do.
But the question was about
how much MPs.
The question was about MPs. So that's why we're talking about MPs.
My answer is about it.
But I think you're right. I think there are lots of other areas. But one of the other things I would just say, and then we can move on, is that there is no centralised HR department in the House of Parliament. Everybody is just a sort of free agent, and I think that does create huge amounts of complications and problems. And
there's the Whip's office. That's the HR department. Basically,
that's not the HR department.
Engages in blackmailing MPs into doing what the executive wants them to do.
Anyway.
Of course, that doesn't happen in our system.
It does. A lot. But they don't set the salaries.
In a way they do, because they can quite easily remove you from your seat if they want to. It's amazing the way MPs who don't behave suddenly find they get problems with their local constituencies.
Their local associations.
All coincidence, of course.
This is from Tony Bilney. Regarding your latest podcast, Donald Trump, in his put down of Keir Starmer, is not aware of Churchill saying that meeting jaw to jaw was better than war. While the title of the military operation, Epic Fury, sounds like it was written by the authors of the Commando comic booklet I used to buy in the 1970s.
The jolly old war picture library.
You said that in your column. What did you say? You said something quite funny.
I said it was like the title of a bad film or a video or a computer game.
Yes. I also remembered a biblical quotation, for they sow the wind and they shall... You should say this because you're better at biblical quotations than I am.
Well, it's. I'm trying to remember the proper one from the King James Version, but he who sows the wind shall reap the whirlwind, yes, undoubtedly. Right.
The above is just my reflections on the consequences of this war action, which could mean that we will be subject to more terrorist acts and other dangers at home and abroad, even though there is the obvious desirability of the removal of a despotic regime. This will be just because of England playing a cameo role as before, with the USA telling us what to do. I've spoken to a few people who disagree with me on this matter, but I am okay with that. As my old manager used to say, you can be forceful without being rude, and I think your discussion on Iran exhibited that. Marvellous. Thank you, Tony. There's another one here. Dear Alas, re-buying clothes by the kilo. This is my department. Or by the... Peter doesn't buy clothes by the kilo, he buys them by the ounce or the
Pound.
The Pound. Imagine the paparazzi photograph capturing Peter rummaging through a skip, attempting to try on various styles and sizes of manky biker jackets. One could only speculate on the remarks of the late Christopher might have offered, or the mutterings circulating within Peter's Oxford private members' clubs. Please keep up the good work, as that episode made me burst out laughing. Les, via Spotify. I'm glad that we're amusing people.
Yeah, but I think he's mistaken about my late brother, who was not a snappy dresser.
Ah, was he not?
Well, he went through a very brief white suit phase, but I'm afraid after that there was some degeneration, as one might say. But yeah, so no, I don't think.
Maybe he was an early adopter of the kilo sale.
Maybe he was. He was. When I turned up one afternoon in his Oxford College wearing my borrowed leather jacket, he was horrified. I do remember that, but maybe for other reasons. Anyway,
was it a biker jacket, or was it a sort of?
It was a straightforward leather jacket. I mean, we didn't have such distinctions as biker jacket in those days. It was a leather jacket.
No, but it wasn't a sort of.
And lots of zips, but not as many as it would have now.
Right. Good. I think that's all we have time for. Thank you for listening to Alas, Fine and Hitchens. Don't forget to check out this week's reading list and watch list, and share the books, TV and films you think we might want to read or watch. For that or anything else, you can email alas@dailymail.co.uk. You can leave a comment on Spotify, or you can send us a voice note on WhatsApp. That's 07796 657 512, and start your message with the word alas. Thank you for listening.